If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Welcome to Like Mother, Like Murder. I am Rachel.
And I'm Heather.
We bring you the good,
The badass.
and the crime.
This is Like Mother, Like Murder.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Like Mother, Like Murder, your favorite true crime momcast. I am Rachel.
And I am Heather. And today we have a very, very, very special, near and dear to our hearts guest joining us. It's been a long time coming, honestly, for her to come over to the LMLM podcast. But we are joined by the most amazing podcaster turned friend turned podcasting bestie. And we were on an episode of hers last year, and we finally got our shit together enough to have her on Like Mother, Like Murder. But we are joined by the amazing Kaydra Brannan, host of Perplexity A Mystery Podcast. Kaydra, thank you for being here. Please say hi to everyone so they can hear your beautiful voice.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. Hi, Heather. Hi, Rachel. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, we're thrilled for
Yes.
you to be here and be joining us for today's episode. But so right off the start, right now, before anything else, I need to give a huge kind of like listener discretion to our amazing, beautiful, wonderful, supportive, awesome listeners, because today's episode is going to be tough for some listeners or viewers. So we wanted to provide a trigger warning before moving forward.
Okay. Yes. And we'll make sure that as we're going through the episode, we will, of course, mention it when something is going to come up. So today, our case is a little outside our normal, I think, Momcast coverage. And we specifically chose this case because we knew it would kind of more fit Kaydra's vibe. And then for our listeners, that it's still definitely Momcast. This is definitely on both sides a mom-related crime. But for our listeners who have different curiosities, if you're not already a listener of Kaydra and you know what her vibe is, but we're talking about, this is an extremely perplexing tale, I have to say. And, you know, we normally focus a lot on the survivors or the victims of these stories. And of course, that will be a main part of what we're talking about today. But there is a mom on the other side of this, a little bit of a spoiler alert, I guess. And so we just want to make sure that we're talking about all the details when it comes to the case. But we're getting into some details today that we don't normally cover. So we just wanted to make sure we put that out there. And we just want to make sure that we're doing justice surrounding the people whose lives were lost throughout what we're going to talk about today. And we just want to make sure that we hit every side of it. But yeah, so just a little heads up. And of course, we will definitely tell our listeners when we're getting into that specific detail throughout the episode.
See, you're the opposite. I was like, no, there is your warning. There is your warning, and
I feel
that
like
is what you get right
I feel
here.
like there's two places specifically that I can think of, at least personally for myself, where I would want to know as a listener, just to brace myself a little extra. That's all.
Yeah, we'll do that. But
Yeah.
before we get into it, Kaydra, can you Tell us about your podcast, what it is, why you're doing it, all of those details.
Absolutely. And I'll try to keep it brief because I know as a listener, I'm like, get into the story. But yeah, so this is like a great pairing because I do all things mysterious. And I know one of the biggest questions when you listen to true crime is, why the hell did this person do this most insane, horrific thing? What's going on with their psyche? What the heck happened? Or if it's unsolved, you know? So I cover a lot of those cases myself, and I really appreciate how you two are so like ethics first and victim based, like victim focused. I try to do the same on my show. So I cover all things mysterious though. So true crime, but also paranormal, weird and dark history, things like that. And I'm, you know, all over, like just like how you guys are accessible, YouTube, all of the things. But I've been doing it for over 2 years now, so I'm slowly catching up to you guys. And yeah,
we're right there.
Happy to be here.
Oh, you're caught up. I think you have just as much as and you guys, and we'll of course post all of it in the show notes for you. But Kaydra not only has some amazing episodes available on her podcast, but also YouTube. But your Patreon is like stacked, girl.
I'm trying.
You've got it going. It's awesome. No, you're
Thank
not
you.
trying. You did it. You're there.
Thank you so much.
Yes. So we are going to get into it, but kind of as a little bit of a segue into getting into it, and just, you know, a general question as well. So, Kaydra, where do you stand when it comes to vampires?
It's like, do I believe in them? Like, what? I don't even.
I guess just like, yeah, that's
Yeah,
a good
you can
question.
start there. You can start with, do you believe in them?
That.
Okay, so in terms of like them being mythical beings, no, I tend to be pretty skeptical. But as far as like people who believe that they are vampires and that drink blood, like that's absolutely a thing. And I mean, I grew up with a dad who loved Bram Stoker and like read that to me. So I know Bram Stoker, I know Dracula.
How old were you when he was reading that to you?
I was probably in elementary school. Yeah.
Oh, man.
And now
Okay.
he does my intros and outros for my show.
I know,
so
I love it. He's got a great voice. It works.
He does voiceover for a living, so.
That's awesome. Okay. Well, if that doesn't give our listeners, you know, a little bit of a, I don't mean to be, what's the word? No pun intended. But if that doesn't give you a taste for what we're going to get into today, here we go. Okay, so we did give a bit of a warning about this earlier, but I do want to just say that there is a major listener discretion today. Lots of trigger warnings. We will be discussing child abuse, both physical and sexual, substance use and abuse, animal cruelty, and murder, obviously. And then if you couldn't quite get it at the beginning of the episode, this is a case discussing vampirism. So it's got some of the occult in it, and it does include cutting one's arm and drinking the blood. So if that is not your thing, you probably don't want to listen to this episode. We'll catch you next week.
To clarify, I hope this is nobody's thing that is listening to this.
It's true.
But
very true.
You guys know what Heather means.
Yes, thank you for the clarification, because yes, that shouldn't, like, I mean, to each your own, but that's a little much. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Rachel, why don't you start us off with some background info?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to start off with the Wendorf family background. Richard James Wendorf, also known as Rick, was born on July 3rd, 1947 in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Naoma Ruth Adams was born on November 4th, 1942 in Harts, West Virginia. The two eventually found each other, fell in love, got married, and started a family. At the time of the crime in November of 1996, Richard was 49 years old, and he was a warehouse manager, and Ruth was a little older. She was 54 and was a volunteer. So she was a stay-at-home mom, and she was a volunteer at the Eustis High School in the city that they were living in, Eustis, Florida. Their eldest daughter, Jennifer, was 17 years old, and their youngest daughter, Heather, was 15. Growing up, they tried to remain this tight-knit family unit. They planned family vacations and put their daughters in extracurricular activities. Jennifer, the older daughter, she was more of the outgoing type. She was a cheerleader and very involved. And Heather, she was known to be more of the artistic type and more introverted. For anyone following along on YouTube, we do have a slideshow. So if you're listening on the podcast, on your streaming podcast, you might want to go to YouTube so that you can see this as well. But we do have pictures as we are talking about this. Something was always missing for Heather, though, the youngest daughter. She was interested in things that her family did not understand, and her morbid curiosities would in time lead her down a path straight to another teenage boy, Rod Farrell, and his vampirism ways. Also, Kaydra, I saw you go, when you heard Rod Farrell.
Oh, that's quite an interesting name. First name is,
okay,
I guess it's short for, no, I guess it's short for Roderick, but to go by Rod is a choice.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So Rod Farrell, he was born in Murray, Kentucky, and that's about 100 miles northwest of Nashville, Tennessee. And he was raised mainly by his young mother, Sandra Gibson. So much of the information that we find about Farrell's childhood, including information about his mom, was all presented at different trials that occurred throughout this process. So during the trial, Sandra Gibson, his mom, was not painted in a warm, motherly glow. Gibson and Farrell's lives were, for lack of a better word, just unstable. Gibson was in and out of relationships and was dealing with substance use herself and some other personality disorders. While I never found official diagnoses, a lot of the expert witnesses did testify to that. And she was also a self-admitted sex worker. And I know a lot of people have very strong opinions about sex work, but I think one thing we can agree on is that if a young child is exposed to that kind of life, along with all the other issues related to, his mom's kind of transient lifestyle and back and forth with boyfriends and moving a lot, as well as the substance abuse, this is not a very healthy environment for a child.
Right. It's just not stable.
Exactly. So later, Farrell's defense attorney will really lean into this, depicting his mom as, and this is a quote, mentally ill parent, former prostitute, and cult member who tried to solicit a 14-year-old boy for sex in a vampire initiation rite, end quote. There's a lot going on in that sentence. I see your face, Kaydra. Yes. We will definitely be unpacking that, and I'll talk some of that through a little later, but yeah.
And where's the father in this picture? Do we know?
Great question. So while Farrell's mom did not seem to be the ideal parent, neither was his father. So during the trial, an expert would testify that in an interview with Sandra Gibson, she had claimed that as a young infant, Roderick Farrell had been physically abused by his biological father, and both Rod's parents were both teen parents, and they actually got married 9 days after Farrell was born.
Oh.
But then
What could go wrong?
Well, I'll tell you, because in a few weeks they broke up.
Shock.
Yeah, major shocker. And so his father did not spend time with him when he was growing up.
Okay.
He ended up getting into the military. Like I said, they divorced and he split. And the father actually said the last time, and he refers to his son as the child. He says the last time he saw the child was when Farrell was about 8 years old.
Okay.
Yeah. So mother, not great, but I mean, sort of, there, but not exactly there. Father, just not there at all. The next thing I'm going to say, I do want to just provide a bit of a trigger warning. This is some child sexual abuse. So on top of this, it was reported that because Sandra Gibson did not have a very stable living situation, she was often in and out of living with her parents. And it was reported that Farrell was raped by his maternal grandfather and some of his grandfather's friends.
Oh my God.
Yes. And there were a few accounts of this by different psychologists, psychiatrists during the interview. And then on top of that, Sandra Gibson's sister, so Roderick Farrell's aunt, also testified that her father had sexually abused both her and her sister.
Okay.
So
there's a lot going on already.
I mean, this kid just didn't have a chance.
No, definitely not. So, like I mentioned before, it was a very transient lifestyle, lots of moving. So mother and son reportedly moved between Murray, Kentucky and Eustis, Florida, which is about 40 miles northwest of Orlando. And they were moving back and forth between the two places after Gibson's parents, so the grandparents, had moved to that area when Roderick Farrell was around 10 years old. So when he was around 10, they had moved down to Florida, and him and his mom were living there. And he lived there for actually a while, until about 9th, 10th grade. And when he was in 9th grade, he met a classmate. They had a class together. And she would testify that he was a mellow, laid-back person, which you can imagine by everything I've discussed that, yeah, not a great environment. But despite that, she testified that in 9th grade when she knew him, he was a very mellow, laid-back person, and that he never spoke about vampires, at least to her.
Well, I mean, he could have also been internalizing a lot of things and been very, withdrawn, quiet, Just because he's mellow doesn't mean that he's emotionally...
There's not an internal... Yeah,
right, he's not emotionally regulated.
Right. Exactly. And we will come to see that I believe that was the case. So he was there until about 9th grade. But then in December of 1995, him and his mother, they moved back to Murray, Kentucky. And while he was there, Farrell actually started living with his grandparents again. Mm. And his mother actually briefly moved to Michigan with her new husband.
Oh.
Yeah. And this was another very short-lived marriage, thank goodness, because court documents indicated that this latest husband was not only physically and mentally abusive, but he was also supplying this young teenager, 9th grade, what are you, 13, 14? He was supplying him with drugs.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So he moved back to Kentucky. His mom had moved to Michigan. Luckily, short-lived marriage. She ended up moving back to Murray, Kentucky. So now they were back together again. But Farrell had been keeping in touch with a few friends that he had made while he was in Eustis, Florida, including that friend I talked about who described him as a 9th grader. And according to this friend, it was after Farrell had moved back to Kentucky, so that kind of 9th grade, 10th grade year, that Farrell first started with the vampire ideology. And apparently, Farrell was not getting into this alone. His mom, Sandra Gibson, was also adopting this whole vampirism lifestyle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hate that.
So, not great.
Hate it.
Yeah.
Definitely not great. So, he was a normal kid. He was living life as best he could with the very, very unstable upbringing. He moves back to Murray, Kentucky, and things start changing. He and his mother are getting into this vampirism.
So,
And-
I have a question. Do we know,
Please.
because I know you said Sandra is a drug user, and then did you say that Roderick was given access to drugs? Okay.
Yes.
So,
At this
like,
age.
do we know if they were using drugs when this vampirism started? Because that's what it sounds like to me. Just
So,
putting, like, context clues together.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I believe that Sandra Gibson, the mom, had a lifelong kind of substance use abuse problems. So I don't think the drugs were new to her lifestyle. It's hard to say with Roderick Farrell because, as you'll come to see, he does provide inconsistent statements throughout. But we do know for sure that at this time, he did have access to drugs.
Okay.
Yeah, when he began getting... Now, whether he had access before this time, I don't know for sure, but for sure during this time.
Okay.
And one of the things that really kind of pushed that over the edge was this game, this role-playing game called Vampire the Masquerade.
Have
So-
you heard of this, Kaydra?
Yeah.
No, but I don't like where this is going.
No, not at all.
Well, quick side note, just because in getting this case together and talking about it, I was talking with my brother, and my brother is a dungeon master, so he plays D&D and loves it so much. And I was explaining this, and he brought this game up before I even brought it up with this case. So apparently this goes way back date. I don't remember how much Heather's going to talk about it right now, but the fact that this game was one of those where it was like an RPG and you would get into character and that kind of stuff. So
Okay.
Right. No, that's a really good point because I am going to talk about the idea that family members and the psychological experts that would later testify, they explained that Farrell was very, very much so into these fantasy worlds from a very young age. And he did, in fact, start a lot of his, as I think many people do, Dungeons and Dragons is one of the original starting role-playing games, right? So he was into Dungeons and Dragons as well from a very young age. And something that was this idea that he was very, very much so into his fantasy kind of life, which to me psychologically makes sense. I mean, the guy's real life is not ideal.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Yeah.
So a childhood friend of his who actually played, the Dungeons and Dragons with him and did all of this stuff with him, he explained that this role-playing vampire game, it just became a very big, significant part of his kind of that thing that started from a very young age, but this fantastical thinking, this fantasy world being wrapped up in this, non-reality. So Rachel will explain more about Farrell's, quote, vampire clan, but reportedly, Farrell's own mother, Sandra Gibson, was a member of this clan. So I mentioned earlier that Farrell's mom, Sandra Gibson, Sandra, it's Sondra, so Sandra Gibson, she attempted to solicit a 14-year-old boy for sex. So during that most recent stay in Kentucky, Gibson, who was in her mid-30s at the time, attempted to entice a 14-year-old boy into having sex with her as part of a vampire cult ritual. So this mother, whose son was not much older than this boy at the time. I think almost the same age, if not maybe Rod was like 1 year older, but literally the same age. This mother wrote sexually explicit letters to this 14-year-old boy, urging him to, quote, cross over, end quote, to become a vampire, and she would be his vampire bride.
What a fucking weirdo.
100%. Absolutely disgusting weirdo. She was thankfully later convicted of this crime, and which is good. Mm-hmm. But she states, so she did say, like, shortly before, and I mean, this isn't much of a spoiler alert. You guys can tell that this is not going great. But she would say that her involvement in the vampirism, it had been, quote, Hollywood idiocy. So she seemed to understand that. But then, during the trial of her son, she reportedly turned to the state attorney and a group of reporters during a break in the court, and she said, quote, "We live forever," end quote.
Yeah, I don't buy that. Like, that she's saying this was for, like, shits and giggles, like Hollywood. No. Like, this isn't Twilight, babe.
No, exactly.
What are you doing?
Not okay.
Yeah.
Not okay.
Mm-mm.
Yes.
She is something else.
You're not Kristen Stewart. Don't compliment yourself.
No. Okay, so Rachel's going to tell us a little bit more about Roderick Farrell's vampire life and just kind of how all of that started.
I am, and I'm going to be talking about a lot of things right now, like a lot of things. There are a lot of names, a lot of people, and a lot going on.
I'm ready, with my notebook.
Everything that Heather just told you is absolutely bizarre, and it definitely, like, shows how he had it rough. He had it so bad, and it just gets worse. So Murray, Kentucky is a small town located in the belt buckle of the Bible Belt. There was a church for every 300 residents. They didn't sell alcohol. It was a religious small town, and Rod, amongst others, was viewed in a very negative light. And before I continue, I feel the need to say, in my opinion, and others can feel differently about this, but, like, you should view him in a negative light with everything that we're about to talk about, because yes, kids will be kids. You can have this fascination into the dark, the unknown, the twisted. You can be different. You can be into vampirism, into it, or claim you're a vampire maybe. But as soon as you harm animals and harm others or go above and beyond that, you're shit.
Mm-hmm.
So I just like to throw tangents in there. I mentioned earlier, Rod was born in Murray, right? He moved to Eustis, Florida for a few years. And while he was there, he met a girl named Heather Wendorf, one of the sisters that I mentioned in the beginning. And Heather, she had this rebellious state about her. And Rod, he fit right into that. They became close during this time, and so when he moved back to Murray, Kentucky, the two stayed in touch. They were calling and messaging and even writing letters to each other when there's, like, in one of the trials, one of the conversations that comes up is they had racked up over, like, $800 phone bills talking to each other on the phone.
Right.
And that her parents were like, yeah, no, this is not going to fly whatsoever. And that's when they would start writing letters to each other.
Because this is the 90s when you
That's
had
exactly
data limits.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Side note, isn't it interesting that from Florida to Kentucky racked up long distance phone charges?
Yeah.
That's so crazy to think about, but yeah.
I was right there as well.
If you have Gen Zers listening to this right now, they're like, what is happening?
Yeah. What do you mean you have to? I pay $20.
Yeah, what's data roaming?
Yeah. What's long distance? What is that?
Back in Murray, Rod wasn't the only vampire around town, or wanting to be a vampire around town at that time. In September of 1995, he met a boy that went by the name Jaden in school. And they didn't really get along at first, and they saw each other as rivals in a way. But over time, they befriended one another because Jaden was heavy on this vampire life as well. He actually already had a vampire clan that followed him and his ways, and so Rod was instantly intrigued and wanted to become a part of this life.
It's concerning that two groups are this close together. Like, you wouldn't think this would be as popular as it is in this area. You know what I mean?
Especially because it's a small town. So, like, the idea that they've somehow found in this very small, very religious town a large group of teenagers who've decided that this is the lifestyle for them.
Right.
It's a very much, I mean, like Rachel said, kids will be kids and they'll rebel, but it's a very interesting way to rebel.
Yeah. I mean, it does. And I don't know if y'all get into this at all, but it does make me wonder what was going on in the town during this time, because with a lot of cults, there's usually a lot of turmoil in the town that like kind of builds to that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What I will tell you in this very moment is researching this case was the first time I was like, nah, I got to move back to California. I'm out.
Like, out of Kentucky. Out.
I'm not doing it.
Is it a spoiler if you tell me if they're still active?
No spoiler. And
it's a yes.
They're not.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a yes and no. It's a yes and no.
But like the cult itself. Okay.
Not theirs. There is like vampirism and
oh, sure. Yeah.
But there's not an active cult that I can tell you about as of right now.
Okay.
That still looks at these people as their leaders, I guess.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. The Kentuckians can rest a little safer. What do you call it? I don't know.
You Kentuckians?
What do you call yourselves, Rachel? I don't even know.
No,
I still have no idea.
Please call it that.
A witness who had earlier testified to Farrell as a regular kid says that she saw him the summer after he moved back to Kentucky. She explained his physical appearance had drastically changed. No longer a red-headed teenager, which the pictures that we had showed earlier kind of showed like his red hair, I think, mullet, if I'm correct. Mm-hmm. His hair was now dyed black. He wore dark eye makeup and was dressed all in black down to his fingernail polish. The witness said he looked like Marilyn Manson.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if that was him because I did not recognize him.
That is not him. So on the left.
On the one on the left is not him. That is Jaden.
That's Jaden.
Oh, okay,
yes.
Okay.
But these two the ones on the bottom right are him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Jaden is the leader of the clan that he's getting into at this point in his life. But on top of that, Farrell had... So on top of the clothes and the dark and the black and all of that, he had cuts on his arms from his wrist all the way up his arm in varying degrees of healing. During this time, things at home for Rod were escalating. And it was something that Sandra was not able to control or deal with. And it's said that she tried to get him help. I'm unsure.
Did she now?
Yeah, okay. I know. We are right there with you.
Yeah, we had the same conversation about that.
You gonna go take him to see Grandpa again?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Take him to see Grandpa or offer him drugs? Or are you serious? Because aren't you the one who introduced this to him and started all of this in the first place? So, like I said, I'm unsure of what ways that she tried to do so because, I mean... If it was getting to a certain point, maybe she did see something, but different things happened in the home that were not okay to her. Such as she had walked into Rod's room one of the days and he had cut himself from his stomach all the way up to his chin. Like a full line all the way up to his chin.
Wow.
And was just letting the blood seep out. he had accumulated different weapons and like metal chains and hooks and things that he had displayed all over his room. And so at this point, she had pretty much said like enough is enough and kicked him out. So Rod left and he moved in with Jaden just for a little bit. But at this point, he moved in with Jaden, who is the one that was the head of this vampire clan as of right now.
Well, so one thing that we do want to say is like, so throughout all the documents, it is said that like Sandra took him to go see a counselor for like a 15-minute like consultation, and that was it. And then they never showed up again. And anytime there would be any kind of like run-in with the law, she tended to like downplay the issues when it came to, you know, what it looked like, I think, to the outside. Now, whether that was because she believed it wasn't that big of a deal or whether that's because she wanted to save face in front of whoever she might have been talking to, in my opinion, any of the quote-unquote help she tried to give her son was half-hearted. And at best, half-hearted. And then eventually she gets to the point where she doesn't even want to deal with it anymore. And keep in mind, at this point, he's literally like 15 years old. And she's just like, fine, just get out. After not really doing, I mean, speaking as a mother, I can only imagine the internal conflict you deal with if your child is going through things like this, especially knowing what the childhood was like. But if your kind of first thing is like, fine, I just can't deal with it, and you kick your kid out of the house instead of doing everything you possibly could to get that child the help, then that's, I mean, still, they're 15. Well, you have a responsibility here.
So I'm also just wondering, like, so first of all, the whole soliciting the 14-year-old thing.
Right.
Are we not all wondering if she assaulted her son? And I have a lot of questions, and I just feel like I don't think that she got him help, and I think that part of why she didn't is because she would have had CPS poking around her house, and they would have found all kinds of stuff. Did she lose custody of him? Because she should have when that whole thing came out. Like,
right?
That's shocking.
Yeah. I will say that the conviction of that came out right around the time that Roderick Farrell himself was going kind of through trial. So all of it was kind of around the same. But one thing I didn't mention, but I can mention now because we've introduced Jaden, the 14-year-old boy that she tried to solicit was the younger brother of Jaden.
Okay.
So you can see why it's really all very
vampire family.
Yeah.
And sick and twisted and crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Back to Jaden. So, like we've said, like we've mentioned, Rod was into this life. Jaden is the one who really changed it all for him. Jaden had his vampire clan. He brought Rod into their lives. And in time, he did a full ritual to turn Rod into a vampire. This ceremony was called crossing over, and it is where they met at a gravesite. They would cut themselves in their shoulder enough to have blood coming out enough, and they would suck the blood from the other members. In their view, this was pledging themselves to the vampire ways and becoming a vampire, because exchanging blood is the highest form of commitment. This made them family and was a bond like no other.
That's one way to look at it.
I don't look at it like that.
And yeah, no, neither do I.
Yeah.
They
did.
Yeah.
Watch all the vampires come for us in these
I know.
comments.
Please. Well,
Hey, I talked about it earlier, and I said that you can be into certain things. You can have certain interests, and you can role play, and you can even believe you're a vampire, okay? Because here's the thing. Jaden, one of the quotes that Jaden talks about is that vampires, they are not supposed to murder people. They are not supposed to be killing. The blood is to transform and cross over and live forever. That is their thing, you know? And so I'm not coming for the ones who don't be murdering, I guess.
Right. You live your life, but you need to draw the line where it starts being a okay. So
yeah, it ain't for us.
Yeah. Well, and Rachel like kind of hit the nail on the head. It's Jaden had one view of vampirism and what his clan and their rituals meant to him. And as is the case a lot of times, what we will see is that Roderick Farrell took this to an extreme.
Oh, yeah, and we're about to see that right now.
And Rachel's going to explain like where those differences really lie.
Right. So this vampire cult that was started and formed by Jaden, it grew and grew, and it was known and talked about around town. Rumors started escalating about the kids who would go to the cemetery and drink each other's blood, have sexual rituals, take or do drugs. But that's the thing. They weren't just rumors. Some of the other members, so they changed their names. So even Jaden, that is not his real name. His name is Stephen Murphy. I'm going by
What?
Right?
What the fuck? Okay.
Yeah, I made the choice to just stick with their vampire names for this because I would have had to go back and forth on so many names.
No, it's way too confusing.
We're going by vampire names for this one.
Yeah.
But some did keep their real names. From my understanding, Jaden's clan turned cult was him, Rod, Gabriel, Raven, and Angelique. This was like the main core group. And there were others. There had been others during this time. But things drastically changed in this group. Jaden, in interviews that have happened after the crime, talks about the falling out with Rod and what happened to create this wedge between the two. He's very open about him and his vampire ways. And I know I just mentioned this. One of those things was the fact that he was not there for the killing of other people. With him becoming a vampire and his thought process of living forever and those kind of things and that blood bond, that was what it was for him. And I'm not saying I agree with any of the things that Jaden was doing either, but Rod was taking it to an entirely different level. And he started to show this side of him to Jaden. Jaden explains a situation once where him and Rod were out and they came across a kitten.
Trigger warning here.
Thank you, Heather. Rod originally was petting the kitten until it clawed his face. This enraged him. He grabbed the kitten and forcefully pushed it to the ground, causing struggle to breathe in this kitten, until he picked it up by the neck, whipping it towards a tree, snapping its body, until the kitten was laying there, gasping for air, and Rod was standing there laughing, and Jaden was in disbelief of, what just happened. This was not something Jaden was about or up for, and so this, amongst a few other things, was the beginning of the end for him.
Oh, that would just be the immediate end for me.
Agreed.
So this is the other thing is I feel like in cults, it's really hard to get, and I'm sure y'all know this too, but it's really hard to get the true story because, Jaden is saying all of this, but he's not really a reliable source in my opinion,
Right.
But wow.
And, exactly. And the hard thing is later on, a lot of what comes out specifically about Rod comes from the trial and a lot of interviews he had with like different child psychology and psychiatry experts, and he was known to not tell the truth.
Okay.
But one thing I know is that we know what makes up a psychopath, and torturing animals is one of those things.
For sure.
I'll leave it at that.
Yep. Leave it at that. Another situation, because like I said, and you said that should have been the end of it, but it was not, was one where Jaden heard that Rod was saying awful things about his girlfriend. So Jaden went to Rod's house to confront him about it. He walked straight into his room, grabbed Rod by the neck, choked him up against a wall until Rod slowly began to lose the ability to breathe. Once Jaden let go, Rod told him that he better leave because he would kill him.
Well, I mean, I think that's fair, though. He just came into his house and put his hands on him, like choking him.
Yeah.
So, see, that's a perfect example of, like, this is not the most reliable source.
No.
Right.
No.
They have a lot going on.
This is like East Coast, West Coast, but the vampire version.
Vampire. Oh my God.
This is
it
crazy.
totally is.
Battle of the
Because
Vampires.
we haven't even got into the second clan yet, so we're still on clan number
There's
1.
a second clan?
Oh, yes, my dear.
Oh my God.
So because of this, because Jaden left and that was that. The two of them were done. That didn't change the fact, though, that Rod, in his mind, Kaydra, and everyone listening, was this 500-year-old vampire.
Of course.
He explained that he had been sired as a vampire and had started a clan called... He called it the Jaden Clan, Heather?
That's what I read, that he called it the Jaden Clan. Now...
I'm sorry, that even shocked me just
Yeah,
now
Rachel's
because
in
I do not
disbelief.
remember. I don't remember him calling his clan the Jaden Clan, and if he did, that's even crazier.
So this is where and maybe she got it wrong, but that was from one of the witnesses who testified at trial. This is the same girl
I wouldn't even put it past him.
that she had met Rod in 9th grade when he was just this, young, redheaded teenager, quote unquote normal, didn't talk about vampires, and then he got into vampirism. And she said, and maybe I don't know, because it's literally audio from 1998 or whatever,
Right.
like maybe I didn't hear it right, but like I swear she said that he had started a clan, call it the Jaden Clan.
That's crazy.
How
Because he
unoriginal.
also had told her, I know,
Right.
right? He can't even, well, and this is the thing. We have to remember Jaden is not his real name.
Mm-hmm.
So I almost wonder if Jaden is the name of a vampire from the role-playing thing.
No, because Rod Farrell's name when he goes by his vampire, he was Visago. He was Visago. Yeah.
No, but
And
I'm wondering
so,
if Jaden is the name of another vampire from that game, and maybe he's just taking the name.
No, yeah, right. This is totally a bitch slap across Jaden's face after separating. I just do not remember that fact at all.
It's
so
just,
now
it's
I'm
from,
like,
everyone,
that's
obviously, we will
crazy.
link everything.
I need
But
to go
if
check my own sources.
If you go to Court TV, you guys, it is absolutely,
yeah, you can watch it all.
you can literally watch the entire trial. The hours and hours and hours of it. And yes, it's from 1998, so it's grainy and sometimes there's literally someone in front of the camera. But it's insane to hear these people talking in real time. I mean, on video, but at the time of what this was like. It's insane.
Yeah, it is. It is. So, well, he started the Jaden Clan to diss the other Jaden, Stephen Murphy. This new group consisted of Rod, a guy named Michael, Scott, Charity, and Dana. They didn't fit in. They weren't accepted or welcome in Murray, Kentucky. And this is just one of those other groups that happened in this town because of their lack of, I guess, other friendships. And in the documentaries, in the videos, anything that you read and research, so many of these people are coming from broken homes, from very, very poor upbringings, and they just wanted this family, and this is the one they choose to have. Not a good choice. They made another choice, another poor choice, that Murray, Kentucky was not for them anymore. No one wanted them there, let me tell you, and they didn't want to be there. And what better place to go if you are into the vampire lifestyle other than New Orleans? New Orleans. Say it.
New Orleans.
Nolans.
Nolans. There you go.
Farrell's group's taste for the morbid continued to grow. In October of 1996,
Trigger warning,
Farrell and one of his associates vandalized the Murray-Callaway County Animal Shelter, killing 2 puppies in gruesome fashion and releasing dozens of dogs. An animal shelter worker arrived to the shelter to find, when she had pulled up, all of the dogs were like out on the property, just kind of roaming. So she's thinking, what in the world just happened? And when she went around the property to see what was going on in a field by the shelter, the puppies had been mutilated, dismembered, gutted, drained of their blood, and absolutely tortured. The then sheriff theorized that those responsible and these disgusting acts were, quote, related to some kind of cult activity, end quote.
Which a lot of times is wrong. Like when we go into Heather, satanic panic stuff.
Yep.
Which I'm going to cover later for Heather. But in this case, it was absolutely accurate, and they're clearly escalating.
Did the satanic panic start in Kentucky? Because I was told it did.
I honestly don't know. I haven't researched it yet.
It did.
Did it?
It did. Yeah.
Well, I can see why. Jesus Christ. What is in the water, Kentucky?
It definitely started Bible Belt, right? It definitely started so yeah, you said this Murray, Kentucky is the buckle of the Bible Belt. I believe it. I believe it.
Wow. Maybe I'll have more to add on that in a few weeks.
I mentioned when I was talking about this to my brother this week, he's the one who said, well, it only makes sense since the satanic panic started here. And I go, huh, what? Say more? Say less, please. I just want to eat tacos and go home. Like, that was me that day. I was like, I gotta go. That is so hard to read. It is so hard to think about. It is so hard. It's disgusting. It's humiliating that people can be this low and disgusting and get lower and more disgusting. So they were Farrell, Rod, and his friend that were there, and 10 other individuals in this group were all held accountable for this.
Wow.
He faced charges of animal cruelty, criminal attempt to commit burglary, and criminal trespassing. I said that like a Kentuckian. Just
Trespassing in the holler.
Wait, so how did they know it was them? How'd they get caught?
I tried to find how they got caught. I couldn't find it because the only this is all I found was some grainy things from like 1997 or 96, I think. But he did face the charges of it, and what you'll see is so you mentioned before, this is clear escalation. Right after this, a few weeks after this, is when Farrell and the other 3 members of his clan that you see in front of you, they would take a fated road trip to Eustis, Florida. So I don't know if because of what happened right after this, they never finished that conviction or brought him up on those charges. But what I do believe is that he was definitely identified as a suspect. He did face charges of this, and shortly after this, he faced some other charges. And it really makes me, exactly what you said, the escalation, it all makes sense to me that he definitely did it. Allegedly.
So, Heather, before you get into those, I do want to say, because I know, Kaydra, you and your notepad keep coming into the frame, so I want to keep you up to date on a couple things, because Heather just said him and his 3 other members. When I did talk about their clan, there was another member, Michael, who he did not go with them on this trip. His mom had actually,
I've got his name down.
I knew you did. That's why, for everyone listening, I wanted to put this out there that his mom had actually put him into a treatment center because he was struggling, and she took the steps that were very necessary to get him help. And so he did not go on this trip, and that I will assume, because it was very hard to find anything on him, I will assume he is doing better and thriving in life.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know because I'm assuming he was a minor when this happened, but hey, wow, a parent who actually helped their child.
Yeah, go figure.
Yep.
Haven't seen much of that in this case so far.
No. So that's kind of the lead up. That's kind of some of the stuff to get you familiar with Rod and that life, and now Heather is going to take you into the crime.
Okay. So, like we mentioned, Rod and the 3 other members of his clan, they decided they were going to take a road trip down to Eustis, Florida. And specifically, they were doing this to meet up with Heather Wendorf. So, Rachel mentioned earlier that Heather and Roderick Farrell had kept in touch. They had met each other when he lived in Eustis, when he lived in Florida. They kept in touch, racking up phone bills, which really made her parents mad, rightfully so. And they continued to write letters. And throughout their communication with each other, several things were said. It had been reported that Heather specifically told Rod that she was being sexually abused by her father. It was also said that she wanted to run away from home. And so Rod decided that it was his responsibility to rescue Heather from her Eustis, Florida home. So this is when Farrell and the 3 others, Scott Anderson, Dana Cooper, and Cherita Kesey, they all get in Scott Anderson's mom's car and they start driving down to, because they're young. At this point, 3 of them are 16, and I believe, is it Dana who's 19? I think just one of the girls was 19. And
I didn't even know she was 19. I didn't know that she was old.
Yeah.
Older.
3 of them were 16. One of them was 19. All teenagers, all very young. And what they planned to do was go rescue Heather from Eustis, Florida, and then they were going to drive to New Orleans, where they hoped to live together in their happy vampire clan.
Okay? With what money?
Well, that is exactly the question, right? So the witness, the one that we've been talking about a lot, she was one of the first people to testify in the trial, and she had known Rod before, and the one reason that they used her testimony is because the night before this whole thing went down, when they arrived in Eustis from Kentucky, they actually went to go see her because her and Rod had kept in touch. So they went to this girl's house, and so Scott Anderson was there, the 2 girls were there, and Rod told her that one of the girls was his wife, and she was carrying his unborn child. The other girl was his prodigy, and Scott Anderson was his son.
Okay.
Yes. And he actually tried to also convince this girl to leave with them to New Orleans.
Yeah, so they're recruiting.
They're recruiting, exactly. Cult behavior. She luckily was like, no, I'm good. Okay. On this same night, this witness, she said that Scott Anderson said, quote, "We're going to have some fun tomorrow night," end quote. Now, at that time, she didn't know exactly what they were referring to. But then she says that Farrell himself said, quote, "Unfinished business," end quote, needed to be taken care of. So when they asked the witness about this, she said to her how she felt that she took it was that he needed to basically take revenge on somebody.
Okay.
Now I highly recommend the episode of this, Oxygen's Deadly Cults, because they interview Scott Anderson, and it's kind of surreal seeing this guy so many years later, and he was 16 at the time, and it's a recent interview, and he's recalling, everything that happened. But he said that before the murders, that Roderick Farrell and Heather Wendorf, they had all met up at a cemetery of all places. And at one point, Farrell and Heather Wendorf, they had gone off kind of to have a long private discussion in this cemetery.
That discussion was to convert her. It was her crossing over.
Yeah.
It was for him to, and it comes out that he says he was her father.
Yeah.
He became her father during this crossover period.
And you have to remember, they are 16. 16. So Anderson said he wasn't close enough to hear everything that was going on, but this is a pretty significant, it seems like okay, these two 16-year-old kids went off by themselves for a little bit in a cemetery. Maybe, but I do want you to remember this, because I'll tell you in a little bit another reason why this may be just kind of important. So they also had another witness who testified that Farrell, that he specifically mentioned killing the Wendorfs in the days before the murder. The next day, so now we are to the day of November 25th, 1996.
Oh, great. Right around Thanksgiving. What a time.
Right around, I'll tell you, it's like literally the Thanksgiving's going to be an important day. Roderick Farrell and Scott Anderson snuck in through the unlocked garage of the Wendorf's home. At this time, the three females, Heather Wendorf herself, Charity Kesey, and Dana Cooper, they had actually taken the car and drove elsewhere. They were actually going to meet up with some of Heather's friends. And according to a mixture of reports, court documents, and a confession from Roderick Farrell himself, this is what happened. So they snuck in through the garage. While they were sneaking into the home through the garage, Farrell found a crowbar to arm himself. There was a lot of talk that they were just going to rob the Wendorfs, but they wanted something to defend themselves in case something went wrong. But as you can see, it will definitely not be just that. So he first came upon the dad, Richard Wendorf, and due to the lack of defensive wounds on the body and the position of the body, it's assumed that Richard was either asleep or at the very, very least unaware of what was about to happen. Farrell proceeded to attack Richard Wendorf with the crowbar, repeatedly bludgeoning him in the head. At this point, where reportedly, Scott Anderson is frozen in shock. In Farrell's own words, quote, a lost puppy. And Scott Anderson, he claims that he did not know Farrell was going to take it that far. Like we said, conflicting reports as to what the actual plan was, but Anderson claimed he did not know this was going to happen.
I'm sorry. I have a question for you because I don't remember if you said this earlier. Did you mention, or are you about to mention, that he did a bunch of drugs before he walked into that house?
Well, I will talk about that.
Okay.
Because...
All right. Sorry. Spoiler, everybody.
No, not spoiler, but something that is, we don't know for sure. Because people lie.
Yeah, like he might not have. So I should have said he said allegedly that he took 10 LSD.
But I'll tell you, yeah, exactly. Right. It doesn't seem real. But I will talk about it.
Okay.
So yeah. Roderick Farrell attacks Richard Wendorf, bludgeons him to death. Scott Anderson is frozen in shock. And after brutally attacking and killing this 49-year-old father, the two began searching the home for valuables, which is what they had originally said they wanted to do, because what they wanted also to do was steal the Wendorf's car.
Which was in the garage that they entered.
Which was in the garage,
by the way. So
done.
If they just wanted the car, they didn't need to go in the home. So that goes against their statements.
Well, I mean, I don't know if the keys were in the car. I'm not saying I believe anything these people are saying, but
good point,
the keys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's true. It's true.
Good point.
They also needed, like you said, Kaydra, they needed money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this, unfortunately, is when Naoma Ruth Queen, most people called her Ruth, when she unexpectedly came upon the scene. She'd been taking a shower in another part of the house and was obviously not expecting to find two random teen boys in her home. But Ruth was a frickin' fighter, and she reacted by throwing a scalding hot cup of coffee on Roderick Farrell.
Yes, queen.
Get it.
Yep.
Exactly. And then she scratched the shit out of him, clawed his face up.
Good.
Unfortunately, it wasn't enough. Roderick Farrell proceeded to attack Ruth, including blows to her head. So brutal that it resulted in her brainstem being severed.
Oh, God.
So, but all the reports show that she had defensive wounds. She went down fighting. She was amazing. In statements to the Louisiana authorities and then also to Florida detectives, Roderick Farrell took most of the blame for the crimes. In his statement that he made, he claimed that he claimed Anderson...
I hate this part so much.
Yeah. So
I want to mute you.
Don't mute me. He claimed, Anderson had nothing to do with it. It was all me. And he said, in fact, he thought about waiting around for Jennifer, Heather's older sister, but decided, quote, nah, why bother? Let her come home, have a mental breakdown, call the police, which I was correct, she did, end quote.
What the fuck?
Completely disgusting. And you can watch or you cannot because it's so ridiculously hard to watch and disgusting. There's video of him saying this, and he is so nonchalant,
Proud of himself.
It's disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, he's psychotic.
100%.
I have the 911 call if you'd like to hear it.
Oh, yes. I mean, I would. Who called 911? Was it Jennifer?
Jennifer called 911.
So
Oh,
let me
baby.
tell you this before we play it. Okay. So the couple was discovered the next morning by their 17-year-old daughter. She was only 17, Jennifer, Heather's older sister. And as you'll hear in the 911 call, she comes in. She finds her parents completely brutalized and her sister is gone.
And I want to add right there too that so the next morning it was still like early AM because she had came home and it was past her curfew, and this breaks my heart because it was past her curfew. She saw her dad laying on the couch and she tried to tippy-toe like upstairs. And then
oh my God.
It's like when she had came down, she had seen the blood in the kitchen. She saw her mom first and then came back to her dad. And it's just, I could not even imagine. It makes his statement so, heartbreaking. Absolutely awful. I'm going to play this, Kaydra. Hopefully you can hear it here, and it will be in the episode.
Okay.
So.
Gets in the kitchen, and there's blood everywhere.
And then there is one other part where she says that Heather's missing. Mm-hmm. She also says right afterwards that she's like, yeah, like both my parents are dead. I don't know if anyone is in this house. And my sister, she's missing. She's not here.
And she's probably like thinking the worst, like they hurt my sister and like, you know, so scared for her. Like, oh my God, it's just so sad.
It is so sad.
It's super traumatizing. And Jennifer, at a later hearing, she describes, you know, finding her parents, and she said she recalls, quote, brains scattered all over the kitchen. And then when she was talking about her dad, having to be like, where did his face go? Because that's how brutal this attack was. So, okay. Whew. So after this brutal attack, Farrell and his group, which now included Heather Wendorf, they did steal the Wendorf's Ford Explorer and they began driving to New Orleans. So Farrell explains that when he finally told Heather Wendorf what happened in the home, that she, quote, flipped. He said she was freaking out for like 100 miles is what he said. But for whatever reason, she did stay with the group. And along the way and at this point, he also says like they all maintain that none of the girls knew that was even including Scott Anderson. Nobody knew that that's what was going to happen. That's what they say. Even though there's evidence that states Roderick Farrell had made it clear that he was planning on something. But now people are thoroughly freaked out, but regardless, they stayed. Cult behavior. So now they're driving from Eustis, Florida to New Orleans. Along the way, they ditch Scott Anderson's mom's car that they had used to originally drive down to Florida, but not before they swapped the license plates. And they also eventually dumped the evidence, so the crowbar, into a river along the way. The group was using a credit card that they had stolen from the Wendorfs, but eventually they ran out of money, obviously. And at one point, Kesey, one of the girls, she attempted to call her mom for money, but she ended up reaching her grandmother instead. And gotta love this grandma because she immediately called the cops. Thank goodness.
Good. I wonder what she even said to her grandma.
I think she tried to leave it at, we're driving here, we need money. I don't know. But this grandma God bless her, she worked with local police, and they basically set up a sting so that the teens would arrive at this location where grandma was like, okay, get here, we'll get you money. And they arrived there. Authorities were waiting for them, and all 5 of them were arrested without incident. And this was 3 days after the brutal murder, which just so happened to be Thanksgiving Day, 1996.
Okay. I have a question. So and you don't have to like get into it if this spoils anything, but so like Heather and Rob, you know, Heather had claimed her dad had allegedly sexually assaulted her, right?
Uh-huh.
And they had like all those text messages and calls. Did they look at those in court to see if like they had discussed a plan?
So they didn't have text, Kaydra, because it's 1996.
Well, I thought you said they
on
had
a landline.
Oh,
They had letters.
Oh, duh. Sorry, I thought you said text
No, but
messages, so that was in my head.
I probably
knew
said
what
it
you meant.
earlier.
I knew what you meant.
Okay.
So
yeah, no, thank you. You're right.
So there is some evidence, and I think I do mention it a little later, but I can talk about it now. So I definitely mention it later because remember I told you that Scott Anderson was at the cemetery and he specifically remembers Roderick Farrell and Heather Wendorf going out.
Right, yeah.
Now he believes, and you can see him talk about this in the Deadly Cults episode on Oxygen's series, he believes that's when Heather was like, we need to kill my parents. And there's also evidence, and I believe this was in a letter, that, oh no, it wasn't in a letter. Someone overheard during one of the phone conversations, so I think this one was a witness statement, overheard Heather telling Roderick, my father's abusing me, you need to basically, I want to run away. The only way they'll let me go, though, is if you kill them.
Okay.
On top of that, Heather also reportedly had asked Jennifer, her own sister, at one point, do you ever think about, like, killing mom and dad?
She probably wanted her to go with her.
And I wouldn't doubt it. And I think that the other thing, and Scott Anderson gets into this in his interview, he talks about, and you can see this, that Roderick Farrell had been sexually abused as a child. Mm-hmm. When he hears that one of his friends is also being sexually abused, Scott Anderson believes that Heather knew this, and she kind of played to that kind of need to be a savior, a hero, a leader, a father. Like Rachel said, he's now her father. And, you know, and I think that in a weird, twisted way, he was like thinking, oh, this will be helpful. But obviously, there are a lot of ways to help a friend in need, right? But with that being said,
Yeah, that ain't it.
that's not it. No. There is no evidence that Heather was ever actually assaulted by her father.
Mm-hmm.
So, before we get into the trial and the sentencing and everything, do you have any other questions? How's everything sitting with you?
I don't have any other questions. I've just been kind of asking them as they come out, but
Okay.
My goodness gracious. Yeah, I mean, this
Right?
is just completely insane.
Absolutely.
Oh, you know what? I am wondering, where's Jaden? What's going on?
No,
J-Man.
Like I know,
Where'd you go?
the Jaden clan. No, I
Steven.
told you they were done.
Yeah.
They were done. After he saw that Rod was this way with the animals, he separated himself and he was done. And that's
Yeah.
when he went to his house and confronted him and choked him out and was like,
Yeah, but you said
We're
he
done.
started his own cult, right?
no, Rod.
I thought
So
they
Jaden
each-
had the original.
Yeah.
Jaden had the original
still
cult.
has his vampire cult back in
Yeah.
back
right.
in Murray.
Okay, so they're just
But they're not
just vibing.
They're just living their
Okay,
they're non-murderous.
They're doing
lies.
little-
They're non-murderous vampire
So they're
clan.
they're like Twilight and all of this.
They shimmer. Correct.
The white trash version of Twilight.
the literal.
That's so sad.
That would be
No,
a really good
you-
movie.
I'm telling you, you should watch and it's a quick episode. It's like 45 minutes. Oh, if even that. No, I think 45 minutes. They interview Jaden all these years later. They interview Jaden, and you can't confirm it, but it seems like he's still living the lifestyle.
Okay.
Because he still speaks very fondly about it, explains the beliefs, like, as in a current way, and, yeah. J-Dog.
The way you say it, Kaydra, too, is funny because I think, like, Joe Dirt meets Twilight.
Yeah.
Like, that's, like, where my head goes.
Jaden, come on the pod.
Come on, man. Happy to have you. Oh. So, despite a lot of conflicting statements, especially from Roderick Farrell himself. I mean, this guy went back and forth on the story so many times between all the various interviews with police and then later the slew of psychological interviews he went through. He even once told a child psychiatrist that when he entered the home that he claimed that the Wendorfs were already dead. This would have been after he had confessed to police that he did it, and exactly how he did it, and everything like that.
Sure, Jan.
I know, right? Regardless of that, he did ultimately plead guilty to the murders. However, and this was the part that was very confusing to me because I'm like, I'm going through, I obviously know he went to trial, but I'm like, but he pled guilty. Why is there a trial? Because the state wasn't messing around. The state was making a case for aggravation. We have to remember, this is Florida after all. This is Florida. They don't mess with that. So during his police interview, after he had been arrested, Roderick Farrell actually seemed to be worried about receiving the death penalty. He was saying like, well, do you think it could really happen? I mean, I'm only 16 years old. And the investigator, the detective, who was actually a police officer in Louisiana because they were caught in New Orleans, he was like, well, in Florida, you're 16, you can be tried as an adult. And Florida, they were having none of it. So it does go to trial for this kind of aggravated case, even though he pled guilty. And in this trial, the defense attempts to point out mitigating factors, including, obviously, Farrell's very unstable, unhealthy upbringing. They point to a history of mental illness in the family. They point to, obviously, he had gone through several rounds of psychological testing, and there were some current diagnoses, including some personality disorders, namely schizotypal personality disorder, which is very interesting because I actually did my master's thesis on schizotypal personality disorder, and one of the Columbine shooters was actually diagnosed with schizotypal personality disorder. So all tracks. They also pointed to the fact that he, in these tests, he did relay some like psychotic symptoms, like hallucinations, and then obviously the persistent drug use that he did, partake in. And the defense psychologists, they testified that Farrell did, though, admit that he was pretending to be mentally ill as well, though. And when you watch the cross-examination, they talked to specifically one of the psychologists about, are there any built-in measures of, validity in these tests to determine whether or not someone is malingering?
Right, yeah.
And in fact, one of the tests, and I mean, I'm not saying anything based on this, you know, these tests, especially because he's young, you know, we know that a lot of these tests, depending on the population, there's a lot of inaccuracies. But one of the tests did come out invalid because he just hit on too many symptoms that it just didn't seem like it was, like it could have been a valid score.
So it's unclear if he was malingering or not?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly right, Kaydra. So the state continued to point to several things, though, to argue against any leniency in the case, including the premeditation of it all. So we mentioned these things before. There was a witness who said that Farrell specifically spoke about killing Heather's parents. Farrell himself said that Heather maybe never explicitly suggested that she wanted her parents dead, but she dropped hints. But Farrell's statements we have to be very careful about. But he did say that. And then I mentioned Scott Anderson believing that Heather played to Farrell's kind of weird, twisted need to be a hero, to be a father, to be a saver, whatever. Now, I'm going to get into what Rachel kind of mentioned earlier. The defense claimed that Farrell admitted to the following: drinking half a bottle of alcohol in the late afternoon before the murders, smoking a lot of marijuana, consuming 8 to 10 strips of LSD, and taking about 15 Prozac pills within an hour of the murders. Now, I've not done drugs. Like, I'm not a good person to say whether or not this is something that a normal person can consume in a few hours and then proceed to be alive. But I don't think so, right? Like, that's a lot.
I think it's like that classic thing of when like a young guy goes to a party and they're like, oh man, I got so drunk. I had like 10 beers and they actually had like 2. I think he's like over exaggerating for sure. Like there's no way that you would be able to like even walk.
Right.
If you had that much in your system, I would imagine.
Exactly.
See, and as I'm right there, I don't know anything about any of that whatsoever. But one of the things that I did think about when reading this, when looking into this, was the fact that he was brought up with this.
True.
He's been doing drugs for so long.
Yeah.
For so long.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's the exact same as like an alcohol type situation, but maybe his tolerance was so high that 10 LSD strips was nothing to him.
Yeah.
15 Prozac was like another day.
And I mean, even if he did do all of that stuff, why does that matter?
Yeah.
Like, you're still...
No, it doesn't.
Like, I've never...
You're still guilty no matter
exactly.
what.
You're still responsible for your own decisions.
Right.
I've never understood
Yes.
that in crimes. That's why you never drink and drive. Like, you know, you're still responsible. So,
Yeah.
Well,
And then there's this.
And on top of that, he did, but again, his word is shit, so we don't know for sure. But he later did tell prison officials that he was not under the influence when he committed these murders. Okay. And there were witnesses that also testified that because other than obviously the 4 people that were literally, I mean, Anderson, who was literally in the home with him, and then the 3 girls who had just left in the car, there were people that had saw him the night before, the day of, hours before the murders, and they said that he did not seem under the influence at the time. So.
okay.
So, after all was said and done, we know that he had pled guilty, and the state of Florida was not fucking around. And as a 16-year-old in Florida at the time, you could receive the death penalty, and that was the decision that was made. He was originally sentenced to death at that trial in 1998, making him the youngest on Florida's death row. Now, later on, there was a law that was passed that if you were a minor, you could not be put on death row. And his sentence was later commuted to life by the Florida Supreme Court because he was only 16 when the crime was committed. But we're going to get into a little bit more about what happens after that and where
we stand today.
These people are today. Yeah.
Yep. Can you change that photo? I don't want to look at his face anymore.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
Thank you.
Isn't it?
Yeah, I'm like, I just need to stop staring. That's all 4 of them when they got taken in. So what we know today, where things kind of stand with some of these people that we have talked about. And there's a lot of reasons, Kaydra, you had brought it up earlier, of why there's not more on certain individuals. These were minors. Mm-hmm. It was hard to find certain things, which I totally understand and get. Mm-hmm. Some people were willing to come forward and do interviews and some were not.
Sure.
So this is some of the people that we were able to find, starting with Rod Ferrell himself. He will rightfully stay in prison for the rest of his life. The judge, during the resentencing hearing in 2020, said, quote, "Based on the evidence presented, the court finds that he is, I'm so bad with words, irreparably corrupt." I don't know why that word is so weird to me.
I always want to say irreparably, but I think that's a different word.
That's so frustrating. During resentencing, 2 out of 3 experts said Ferrell, he knew the difference between right and wrong. And that he, quote, was not under the influence of extreme or emotional distress when he murdered the victims, end quote. On top of that, county jail officers found 2 homemade knives in his cell. And he bragged to a female officer that he could escape by attacking transportation officers. Kaydra, what I'm about to tell you, I can't wait to hear what you have to say.
All right.
Actually, Heather, read this because she goes off. Go.
Oh my God. So this is just disgusting. But so he had a resentencing hearing in 2020 with which luckily just bombed. The judge, rightfully so, was like, hell no. But there were 2 women who testified at this hearing in his defense, including a woman who said she wanted to marry Ferrell. And that there was a woman that was, I think this was the same woman, the one who said she wanted to marry him. She was a teacher in Texas. She said she would give him a home and make sure he had a job. There was another woman who also had been talking to him, and it really just got me down a whole horrible rabbit hole of jail groupies and the whole twisted, just absolutely, I can't understand it. What the fuck?
Can't understand it, but you didn't even get to the point. He is married to her. He's married to a woman named Stephanie right now.
He's married to another, this isn't the same woman, and that's what's crazy.
No, it's not the Texas woman.
It's not the Texas woman from 2020, but he is now married. It's 2025, and now he's married to a woman named Stephanie. What?
So I need to just do an episode about groupies because this has been something that has always perplexed me and disgusted me. And I mean, the one thing I can say right now is just, ladies, do better.
Seriously.
You deserve better.
You do.
And I'm sure there's someone that needs to hear this. You deserve better.
Yes.
And the second that you are talking to someone who is in prison for murder, I need you to take a good long look in the mirror and say, this is not how my life should be. Mm-hmm. Just do better.
Tell them, Kaydra. Louder for the ones in the back.
It's so weird. It's so gross.
So weird. I understand that, we see it every day. Daddy issues are a real thing. We understand that. But go cut some bangs or something, girl. There's something else you can do here that doesn't result in marrying a imprisoned, convicted psychopath. Ugh.
Yeah. I wonder if it starts off as like a parasocial kind of relationship, you know? Like,
Yeah.
we have some experience with that as content creators. You know, there's people who think that they know you and don't, and, you know, maybe put you on a pedestal. So I think it could be
Yeah.
like a sick, twisted way of that, where like these are probably people who followed the trial, who already had some issues going on,
100%.
and were already lonely. And yeah, they just wanted some type of connection. I mean, but do better.
Do better. That is where he stands. That is where he stands today. Anderson, Scott Anderson, the one that was in the home with him. A different judge reduced Anderson's life sentence to 40 years in 2018. He pled guilty in 1998 to avoid a possible death penalty. And for me, that tracks with his, because, I mean, yeah, shouldn't have been in there, shouldn't have been doing what you were doing, but you're not Rod Ferrell.
Right.
So.
I mean, it's hard, but I mean, he was obviously very young, and then based on what we know about the crime, it sounds like forensically too, they weren't able to tie him to the murder. But
No,
Right.
They didn't forensically tie him to it, and all the accounts, other than Rod Ferrell's lie that claimed that the couple was already dead, which we know is not true. Rod Ferrell even says, like, no, he didn't do anything. He froze like a puppy. So
Yeah, but we know how much he loves puppies, right? Okay, so Heather Wendorf. She was never charged or convicted with anything. She is married now and living a quiet life off the radar. Couldn't find much on her. I did find that when she got out, so like they were all taken and talked to and did all the interviews and did all the things, and they decided that she, you know, based on what you just heard from everything with the conversations that happened or didn't happen and the lies or were they lies and all of that kind of stuff, her grandparents and other family members were so ecstatic because they said that they knew that she had nothing to do with the murders of her parents. And it's like, do they just want to truly believe that? You know, I don't know. And I could not find a damn thing on where she stands with her family today. So I don't know if they still feel that kind of way. I don't know if any of them have a bond. If they don't, any of it.
well, who knows?
Jennifer.
Maybe she'll make a TikTok, and we can hear all about it.
That is one case I will not be covering ever in my life. I hate her.
I hate her.
Her face right now popped up in my head, and I just almost punched my screen. I just almost hit it. Okay. Jennifer, Heather's sister, you know, she had to come home to find her parents that way. I don't think she ever ended up close with her sister again. She was recently at Rod Ferrell's attempt at reducing his sentence, and she was there to say, don't let it happen. It would be awful for her to have to live a life looking over her shoulder after what she experienced and the pain and the trauma that went along with it. In this, like in her statement, she said, like, it's not only her, she has kids, she has a family, and she does not want to have to think or fear or feel any of that. And I'm just so grateful that, I mean, not that I would have seen it going any other way, but unfortunately there are some damn cases that things happen, and there's people out there that do have to look over their shoulder, you know,
yeah.
But Jennifer does not, because Rod is not getting out.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And then the other two girls, so Rod,
Dana
obviously
and
where he
Jen.
needs to fucking be. Scott Anderson, 40-year sentence. He'll be getting out when he's close to 60. Heather, I believe there were 2 grand juries that just didn't indict. And then Charity Kesey, she was 16 at the time. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Dana Cooper was the 19-year-old. She received a 17-year sentence. And, I mean, that was back in 1998, 98 when the trial finally finished. So, yeah, they're both out. They've been released. And, I mean, also, Rachel and I talked about this a lot when we were going over the case. 16, 19-year-old, there's a definite possibility that they knew what was going to happen. They obviously were not even near the house. They were away in the car, but they stayed in the car, like, after Rod and Scott came back and they were told what happened. They stayed in the car. They drove with them all the way to New Orleans, but they did as well serve time. Yeah. So, Kaydra, that is the case of the brutal and horrific and just tragic, horrible murders of Richard and Ruth and the vampire clan. Like we said, we definitely tried to find something perplexing. I am the cult one out of us. I've definitely been the one to go towards the cults, and I thought that would be a very perplexing and mysterious and very what the fuck episode to bring for you today. And we still obviously wanted to keep our mom cast tradition. We see some definite mom related on both sides of this case. So what'd you think?
Y'all did a great job. Have y'all covered a cult before?
Yes.
She has.
Okay.
I have. Yep.
Okay, because I always feel like when I cover cults, it takes so much time and research.
Oh, God, yeah.
So I just wanted to say, like, good job, because that's such a big case, and it's so complicated. There's so many names, and I thought y'all told it really well. But, yeah, I mean, it's incredibly perplexing. And I also feel like every time I do a cult episode, those episodes, for whatever reason, get, like, tons of downloads. So I think there's like a morbid curiosity that a lot of people have with them. It's just crazy. Like the idea of uprooting your entire life and going and doing these like unspeakable things. And especially for it to lead to murder like this. I mean, yeah, it's incredibly devastating. I feel so awful for Jennifer. That was just heartbreaking.
Oh, I know.
So heartbreaking.
But yeah, great job.
Aw, thanks. It was definitely new territory, and our listeners are going to have to let us know how they liked it, because Rachel and I don't usually split things up like we did today. You guys are so used to just hearing one of us, just tell all the details of the case, so you guys are going to have to tell us how you liked it.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, you know what's really funny, too, is our very first episode, we split it up. We both did... Well, we didn't do it like this, but we both covered something on that.
Yeah.
And so it's like we both talked on that. Now this is our last episode. Goodbye, everybody. No, just kidding.
No,
And I am taking over.
Yes, Kaydra, take over. I was telling Kaydra how, like, literally it was like I think, was it our second? Was Catherine Knight our second episode, or was it like our fourth? Our fourth episode, and then we did Elaine Park where we kind of split things up. But
Okay,
yeah, no, I
those.
really liked it. I think that Rachel and I both look at different details, especially in a case like this. And so it was really interesting to see once it all came together, like, oh, there's a lot out there that like she focused on and I focused on, and we really got to pull in a lot of details. So I liked it.
Yeah, I love that. It helps you like make sure you get everything too, you know? And sometimes there's so many conflicting sources in true crime where you're like, am I reading or understanding this right? Like, what do you think?
The Jaden clan, I was like, are you kidding me right now? I did not see that.
Well, and that one, I didn't find it anywhere
And I read our
except for,
scripts.
like, I didn't find it anywhere except for in that girl's testimony. And I wonder if maybe, like, she was thinking, like, she's talking about how when she called him on the phone, maybe it was when he was still in his own, or he was still in Jaden's clan. I don't know. But one thing I will say, and we'll obviously post all of our sources in the show notes, but one of the big sources that I used was Court TV, because they have the entire trial spelled out. And then there's a lot of good information as well in that Oxygen Deadly Cults series. So highly recommend the Oxygen series if you're down for 45 minutes. The trial is literal hours long because it's the entire thing. So if you wanna buckle in, that one would be a lot more to digest.
With that said, though, we really, really appreciate you joining us. We said it earlier. It was only a matter of time. It took way too long for this to happen, so I apologize.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Life is so crazy. It was so jarring at the beginning when I can't remember which one of you said it. You were like, yeah, last year when we were on Kaydra's show, I was like, oh my God, like
I know,
my
right?
brain's like a year ago. Like it wasn't a year, but
compute.
it was so weird. But
Totally.
yeah, if you guys haven't listened to our other episode,
Chateau Marmont.
that was really fun. That's over on my show. We talked about the Chateau Marmont, and there's true crime in it, but there's also a heavy paranormal element. There's some conspiracy. If you like celebrity gossip, it's good. I want to say it's episode 88, maybe. It's in the 80s, I think. But that's a fun one for sure.
Yeah, and talking about that, so before we go, once again, I know you did it at the beginning, but could you kind of give everyone where they can find you, all that great stuff, all that jazz?
Yes. So I have discovered, the more that I've been talking to people, that I am convinced my show is hard to find, and I think it's the name, because I have been on as guests, and people are always like perplex, they don't know how to say it. You guys did great, but
see, and that's funny because I mean, as a listener of yours, and even just so talking about that recently with Kevin and you, and hearing him say it's not hard, and also I don't know if it's because I am a fan of yours and I do listen to you, and I'm an active, engaging listener. It's like, guys, it's not that hard.
Well, I appreciate that because I've been having a bit of a midlife crisis in the sense of a mid-show crisis where I'm like, do I need to rebrand? Because I don't know. That's been a whole thing. When people say my show, they can't say it. And Kevin said he had to practice it 5 times. So it is Perplexity, a mystery podcast. If you just type in Perplexity, it might not come up. So Perplexity, a mystery podcast. I'm on all podcast platforms. I'm on YouTube. So you can find me anywhere that you're listening to this right now or watching this. And I release new episodes every Wednesday. We're in our 2nd season. I have over 100 episodes that you can go binge. And it's anything from true crime to dark and weird history, UFOs, cryptids, ghosts.
You're not in your 2nd season.
3rd season. I meant second
didn't
year.
You just start your 3rd season?
Sorry, I meant my second year.
Okay.
Because I started in December 2022. Mm-hmm. So I'm in my 3rd season, 2nd year.
Mm-hmm. Okay, gotcha.
So tons of stuff to binge, and I would love to have you guys. And if you do listen to the show, I would love to hear, if you found me from Like Mother, Like Murder. I always like knowing where you guys are from. And then I can thank Rachel and Heather.
Yes.
Yeah, and this is your guys' homework because it's a requirement to pass. You guys have to go to her show.
We'll make it so easy. It's going to be an open book test because all you have to do is go to the show notes right now and click the link to Kaydra's show because we will definitely be linking it. And I have to say, personally, obviously, I'm an avid true crime podcast listener, but I have always loved your stuff, Kaydra, because A, it's incredibly well researched. You do a great job. You have a great podcast voice. I know you do YouTube too, and you have the most awesome, like, Rachel and I struggled putting together like 10 slides. You do such a good job with like your images. And some of my personal faves of yours aren't the true crime ones. I will have to say Hecate was like, or however you say it.
Hecate?
Which one? Hecate? I listened to that episode twice, and and it was funny because I went back and listened to a part of it the third time because I told my husband, I said, I want to play that video game that she's talking about. And he's like, you want to play a video game? Because I'm not a video gamer. And so I was like, yeah, because it's like Hecate, and it seems really cool.
It's a fun video game.
I see. And my other fave of yours that I was just like, oh my God, this is insane, was the Paris Catacombs.
Oh.
Such a good episode.
That was my 100th episode.
It's so good. And then there is one of the true crime ones that I was like, oh my God, where is this going? This is insane. And it's going to totally, I'm going to sound so bad right now, Princess
Latifah.
Yes, okay, Latifah.
Yes.
And that story, oh my gosh, wow. So, Kaydra, yes, we are fans, and you all should be too. The best ever.
Y'all have been so supportive too. I just that's one of the things I really love about this community, but like there's particular people that stand out of just like being so supportive and so sweet and just like genuinely like, how are you? And like that is y'all to me. So I love you guys so much. And yeah, with that, I also just wanted to say, like, I feel like for the last several episodes, they are all true crime cases.
Yeah.
So if you are like exclusively like, I only listen to true crime, then like, you know, there's tons
there's
of
still
stuff.
Plenty.
Yeah, there's
got a lot.
plenty. Yeah.
Yeah.
I even there's a true crime case of a woman who solved her own murder because there's a heavy paranormal element. So there's a lot.
Is that
we are
Teresita?
Yeah, Bossa.
Yes, yes.
That's my Filipino homie right there.
Oh my God, I love her. What a baddie.
Right?
I can't end this episode, so I have to say another thing really quickly. So going back to Princess Latifah, so I remember, Heather, you and I talking about it because we were both like, did you listen? Did you listen? And I was in my garage and I had made it a point that I was going to clean the shit out of my garage that day. And of course I take my speaker downstairs and I'm listening to it. I sat down on the floor in the garage. It was like, what is happening? It was crazy.
So
we can't say it enough.
Wild.
Yeah.
I knew absolutely nothing about the state of Dubai. Like, not. I'm not saying it's a state. I'm saying like the situation. Over there.
Right.
And oh my God, it was just very terrifying and upsetting. And it's a recent story. Like,
right.
So, one of my listeners, I think that was Sam, suggested that story, and she learned about it through a TikTok, and I think sent me the TikTok, and then I just went down a rabbit hole and was like, well, this has to be done ASAP.
Yeah.
And yeah, wow. So yeah, that's an insane one for sure.
Yeah.
Wow is right. All right, fine. We're 2 hours deep, I guess I'll say that. We always sign off with K love you, bye. So please feel free to join us when we do that. It's one of our favorite things.
Love
you guys, stay amazing, stay curious, question everything, play D&D if you want to, look into things that intrigue you, but be a good person.
Mm-hmm.
Don't harm or kill animals or people, you guys. Don't do that. We will talk to you guys next week. K love you, bye.
K love you, bye.
Okay, love you, bye.
Love a good mystery that leaves you wanting more? Check out my podcast,
Hi, I'm Kaydra, the host of Perplexity A Mystery Podcast. I tell tales every single week that have left me perplexed. You'll hear true crime cases, mysterious disappearances, learn about cults, hear baffling sightings of cryptids, chilling paranormal encounters, and even dark and weird history. I release new episodes every Wednesday, and you can listen anywhere podcasts are available. I'm also on Patreon, and you can even watch me on YouTube. Perplexity, a Mystery Podcast. Stories that will leave you perplexed.